Final ending to the sauce, part 1 down below. I'm glad you stood your ground, honey, she said. But let me give you a reason to always stay strong. Our conversation dwindled after that. Soon, I found myself cautiously entering our new bed. Jean joined shortly, without any theatrics. She simply removed her long t-shirt, revealing her minimal attire beneath, and slipped into bed beside me, snuggling close. No rush, honey. We don't have to rush into anything. We can just hold each other tonight, all right? I'm okay with that, I responded. Mike, I just want you to feel joy. I want you to give us a chance, she murmured, encircling me with an arm and pecking my cheek. Good night, honey. As I drifted off, my thoughts lingered on the gentle firmness of her embrace and her comforting scent. Jean curled up against me, her face buried in my chest, emitting a contented murmur. Regrets began to cloud my mind. Jean, like her mother, was petite, yet there was a youthful firmness to her. The warmth of her body seeped through to me, igniting a deep longing. My hand instinctively found its way to her smooth back, feeling her contented vibrations. She intertwined her leg with mine, drawing us closer in an intimate embrace. My thoughts raced, yet the barrier of my simple attire maintained a delicate boundary. Despite the proximity, she seemed at peace. Mike, she whispered sleepily, you forgot to kiss me goodnight. But I did, I replied. No, you didn't, she persisted. I kissed your cheek, and you didn't return it. But Mike, I'm quite sensitive there, you know, she murmured. My mind raced, feeling teased yet captivated by her playful tone. Mike, could you remove those shorts? They're a bit uncomfortable, she requested softly. Silently, I complied, and she comfortably settled close again. Now, without anything between us, the connection felt more intense, more real. We continued to kiss, each moment more profound than the last. She didn't carry the usual harsh scent of smoke, which was a pleasant surprise. The warmth between us grew, signaling a deeper connection we both yearned for. Yet, the closeness was more challenging to navigate than I had anticipated, especially compared to previous encounters. Sorry, dear, she whispered, shifting her position, and we found a new level of closeness. The contrast was significant. There was an undeniable warmth and intensity. The closeness required effort, evident in the heat we generated together. Every part of me was electrified, struggling to maintain control. Mike, I'm sorry, she breathed out. I wanted to make this perfect. It's overwhelming, like we're entirely intertwined. I'm about to. A release followed, marked by a soft sigh. At that moment, I realized the restraint was no longer necessary. Our connection deepened, culminating in a shared moment of complete unity. Mike, this feels incredible, she gasped, overwhelmed by a new wave of emotion. Her voice was laden with intensity. As the moment passed, she wrapped her arms around me again. I'm sorry, dear, she said. This was unexpected, but I longed for it. It felt amazing. Don't be upset, okay? Jean, I felt it too, I shared openly. It was something truly special. Was it better than before? She queried. Much better, I assured her. Can we try again? She proposed eagerly, and that marked the start with Jean. In the ensuing nights, it became clear she shared her mother's vivacity. Whatever she lacked in knowledge, she compensated with enthusiasm to learn. Her vibrant personality made her more captivating than anyone before. In just a few weeks, Jean became a cherished part of my life, only rivaled by the spirited presence of her sister Allie. Just over a month after moving in together, I was feeling content again. However, my contentment was short-lived when I arrived at Leanne's place one afternoon for my usual visit with my daughter. Mike, you really have a strong influence, Leanne remarked. I suppose our daughter's proof of that, I responded, thinking of our shared genetics. She turned out quite well. That's not my point, Leanne replied with a hint of sadness. Our daughter is about to become an aunt to her sibling. What's the issue, Leanne? I inquired. Jean called me today, she explained. It's been a while since she reached out, especially after the misunderstanding. She wasn't feeling well, so I brought her back here. I was hoping she'd be back at your place before you noticed. After a doctor's visit, it turns out, Mike, Jean is expecting. I'm too young to be a grandmother, and Jean is too young to be a mother. We need to figure this out together. I was taken aback. After seeing Allie, I hurried back home. In the kitchen, I found Jean. Before she could speak, I interjected. Jean, do you still have that ring I planned to give your mom? Yes, Mike, but we really need to discuss something important. She started. Please, just bring the ring, I interrupted. She returned with it shortly after. Jean, how do you feel about this ring? Is it to your liking, or do you prefer another? I asked. I've always cherished this ring, she replied. It was never really suited for my mother. Would you wear it, then? I suggested. Mike, this is an engagement ring, she noted. Are you suggesting? Would you agree? I asked. Yes, absolutely, she beamed. That night, we stayed up late, just talking and planning our future. The next morning, I woke up feeling a deep connection to Jean, different from any I had experienced before. Jean, while inexperienced, was eager and open-minded, willing to explore life and its possibilities with me. She was enthusiastic about our journey together, ready to embrace new experiences without hesitation. I should have been filled with joy. I was young, had a great job, a lovely home, and a classic Mustang. Engaged to a woman who adored me, my life seemed complete. Yet, I was restless, possibly due to unresolved feelings about Leanne. Despite my fortunes, several issues prevented my complete happiness. First, there was Leanne. I felt she had wronged me deeply, escaping consequences after betraying our trust. In retaliation, I had caused her financial and personal troubles, but the satisfaction was fleeting. I flaunted my new relationship with her daughter, whom I had quickly impregnated, as a form of revenge, yet it didn't bring me peace. Then there was Jean, my fiancée. Despite our physical relationship, I lacked genuine love for her. Our relationship had escalated quickly, perhaps too much so, and my feelings hadn't deepened. Jean was ecstatic, planning our grand wedding with her mother, unaware of my reservations. Committed to my responsibilities, I hoped that my affection for her would grow over time. My daughter Allie was another concern. It was difficult to be apart from her and see her raised by Leanne, who seemed more interested in the financial benefits than in Allie's well-being. Allie meant the world to me, and I cherished her achievements. After several interventions, I convinced Leanne to enroll Allie in daycare, seeing it as a step towards having her live with Jean and me, which would be the ultimate affront to Leanne. I admit I'm not without faults. I believe in retribution and can't help but respond when wronged. Whether happy or unhappy, I was always ready for revenge. This trait resurfaced when, after leaving Leanne's place, I met Dater, Hal's wife. Despite her unremarkable appearance and stout figure, she intrigued me, reinforcing my belief that every person has their unique allure. Dater was a woman who had faced a lot, yet she maintained her kindness, making her one of the most admirable people I had met. That's why I approached her to talk. "Mike, I need a favor," she began, revealing that she had finally uncovered the truth about her husband's actions and motives. As I turned to leave, urging her to move on, I admitted my actions towards her husband and expressed no regret, hinting at his unfaithfulness and its consequences on his reputation. Dater stopped me, trying to make me see the emotional depth of my past relationship and the betrayal that came with it. She mentioned the pain and rivalry it caused, especially with Jean's involvement. She then shared her own desire for retribution, not through leaving her husband but by making him feel her anguish. She cryptically asked for my assistance, tied to the day I would bring my child home. Despite my uncertainties and Jean's probable disapproval, curiosity led me to Dater's home the following day. Greeted by Dater in a casual robe, I followed her, sensing the gravity of the situation. Her determination was clear, and despite the risks, she was set on her plan for retribution against her husband. The scenario took an unexpected turn in the bedroom, where her husband was present, visibly upset. Dater's actions were bold and deliberate, aiming to provoke a reaction and convey her feelings of betrayal and hurt. The tension and complexity of the emotions in the room were palpable, showcasing the deep-seated issues and the lengths to which Dater would go for her perceived justice. He was infuriated, hurling accusations at her. "Unbelievable, Dater. After 2 decades of marriage, you throw this in my face," he exclaimed. I seized the moment, gently persuading Dater to relax beside Hal's seat. Our connection intensified, her cries of mixed emotion filling the room. Overwhelmed by the experience, she staggered to her feet, her distress evident. "You could have been more cautious," Hal muttered resentfully. "And you, with our neighbor, were you cautious then?" she retorted. "Hal, I'm overwhelmed. I can hardly stand. This has really affected me. We're close to the end, Hal. Remember this lesson before you stray again." "Like, can I ask one more thing?" she inquired, positioning herself vulnerably. Hal looked on, a mix of shock and realization crossing his face. It was clear he had never ventured this far with her. After preparing, she called out to Hal, her voice tinged with discomfort. "Hal, this is too much. Stay with me. Ask him to be gentle," she pleaded. "Like, she's asking for gentleness," Hal managed, each word a struggle. Gradually, she adapted, signaling her growing acceptance. "This is outrageous, Hal," she exclaimed, her voice a mix of challenge and exhilaration. "Tell him to continue," she urged. As the intensity concluded, Hal's emotions overflowed. Yet Dater wasn't done. She approached me, hinting at further intimacy. "No, Dater, stop," he protested. "It's not right. Listen, Hal, after all your discretions, I'm taking control this once. We need to decide who's going to finish this," she stated, presenting Hal with a daunting choice. His complexion paled at the thought. "So, what's it going to be?" she pressed. He couldn't bring himself to agree, yet his nod gave her the go-ahead. "Hal, I'm uncertain," she expressed. "I think it would be better if you clarified your desires." Her gaze lingered on him, anticipating his response. "I want you to kiss him," he stammered, and she complied. Then she approached Hal, lips pursed as though she intended to kiss him. Hal became physically ill on the floor. I got dressed, ready to exit, when she tenderly seized my arm. "Hal, I hope you comprehend the lesson, dear," she spoke softly. "You were fortunate this time. Next time, it might be more challenging for you." "How?" He wept. "How was this fortunate?" Hal was visibly distressed. "Mike is decent," she remarked. "He won't disclose this to anyone. Thus, only we 3 will be privy to this event. My quest for retribution concludes here. Regardless of your infidelities, we start afresh now. There will be no further vendettas among us. Do we concur?" "I agree," I responded. Mike, it was never my intent to harm you, Hal lamented. I must confess, I've been involved with Leanne since before your acquaintance. It never ceased. She had liaisons with many locally. Don't be dismayed, but she's been unfaithful. I assumed you were merely another fleeting interest, unaware of your genuine feelings until now. Hal, should you betray me again, I'll openly flirt with those golf buddies of yours, Dater interjected. You, Mike, are also welcome to join. Reluctantly, I felt a sense of relief. As I departed, Dater mentioned sharing my contact with Kyle's spouse. About a month later, my life took a dramatic turn. Arriving home early to discuss wedding venues with Jean, I found her on the porch, radiantly expectant. We managed to visit the church, a stunning yet pricey choice, far exceeding others in cost and complexity. Despite this, Jeannie's wish prevailed. After securing the church, I returned her home where she hinted at a romantic evening. Promising a night of tenderness, she ascended to rest. Before I stepped back into my car, I thought grabbing a sandwich was a good idea since lunch had passed me by. That's when I overheard Jean conversing with someone. I'll admit, my trust was threadbare. The past experiences with her mother had sharpened my skepticism towards nearly everyone. My guilt deepened when I eavesdropped on their call in the kitchen, only to find out they were discussing church matters. Despite my intrusion, I wanted to gauge Leanne's reaction, secretly hoping she'd exhibit some remorse for what she was losing. Their talk about church and wedding plans unveiled some unsettling truths. But the conversation took a jarring turn when Jean expressed her fears about me discovering the baby's true paternity. Mom, I'm anxious Mike might realize the baby isn't his, she confided. Don't fret, Leanne reassured with a dismissive tone. Keep him satisfied, and he won't suspect anything. Once people start commenting on the baby's resemblance to him, he'll be convinced of his paternity. Mike might be overly trusting. He believes Allie is his, yet I have no clue about her real father. I knew the baby wasn't Mike's because I was already pregnant before we met, yet he never questioned the early birth. He genuinely cares for her, which astonishes me because he voluntarily supports a child that isn't his, spending more on childcare than I do on our mortgage. Mom, this situation feels wrong, Jean expressed her unease. He's a good person. This isn't right. The real mistake was your reckless moment with Ronnie, Leanne lectured. I've told you countless times, Ronnie is no good. He's unemployed and aimless. Had you stayed with him, you'd have no future. But, Mom, Ronnie loves me, Jean countered weakly. Keep seeing Ronnie if you must, Leanne coldly suggested. Just ensure Mike remains content, and don't forget I expect a portion of whatever you get. Silently hanging up the phone, I went back to my work, burying myself in it to drown out my thoughts. But as I worked, I couldn't help but reflect on my gullibility. I considered myself smart, with a good education and career, yet I was outmaneuvered by their deceit. Much of my behavior towards Jean was fueled by resentment towards Leanne. I had given Leanne my heart, only to be exploited. This realization made me see myself as too passive, far from the assertive man I believed I was. They had provoked me, and I was determined to settle the score. I needed to plan my next move carefully. One thing I knew I had to ensure was that they were both clueless about what was to unfold. Surprisingly, neither of them owned a mobile phone, which was almost unheard of these days. Jean had been pestering me for an iPhone like mine, but I hadn't given in yet, which turned out to be fortuitous. I made a quick stop at an electronics store to pick up some gear for recording phone calls, ensuring I had all I needed. Consequently, I arrived late at the daycare, a first for me, which amused Mrs. Crenshaw, the manager, who noticed my concern. In her office, she broached the topic of my daughter, Allie. Mike, you're a dedicated father, but Allie is lagging developmentally. Your separation from her mother seems to be affecting her, she explained, adding that she was obligated to report any signs of neglect. Her words made me anxious. Mike, don't stress, she reassured me. This could be beneficial for you. I've discussed Allie's situation with a contact at CPS. There have been concerns about her living condition, and if deemed at risk, she could be placed with a family member, potentially giving you custody. At that point, I couldn't hold back my emotions. Mrs. Crenshaw was taken aback, quickly ensuring Allie would be cared for in her absence before focusing on me. What's going on, Mike? She inquired. I poured out my story, from meeting Leanne to the recent discoveries. Mrs. Crenshaw listened intently, shock apparent in her expression. When I finished, she looked at me sympathetically. You've been through so much, she said. Do you know the biological father of Allie? I'm not certain Leanne does, I admitted. I'm listed as her father on the birth certificate. Mike, I'm talking about the biological aspect, she clarified. But we know who's been there for her. And who's that? I asked. It's you, Mike, she affirmed. Do you love your daughter? More than anything, I mentioned. That works for me, she replied. Shortly after, I went to fetch Allie to take her home. As soon as she spotted me, she stretched out her arms. She exclaimed. You see, Mrs. Crenshaw observed. To her, you're the world. We may care for her all day, but when you arrive, it's like we're invisible. This realization added another layer to my complicated feelings. Despite the fact that Allie wasn't biologically mine, the bond felt undeniable. Leaving her was as unthinkable as harming myself. Arriving at Leanne's, the chaos of her household was evident. She seemed indifferent to our tardiness. The place was disorderly, a stark contrast to the past. The children, looking neglected, flocked to me as they used to. I handed Terry some cash to get food for the kids. "Oh, hey Mike," Leanne greeted. "We need to discuss. This house is a mess. I need support. Could you arrange for a housekeeper and a babysitter?" "Leanne, managing the house and caring for Allie should be within your day's work," I pointed out. "Mike, I get it, but you need to prioritize," she countered. "Jean is your concern, sure, but Allie is our daughter. We can't let her down. If you have a better solution, I'm all ears." I made a light-hearted suggestion about Allie staying with Jean and me. "As long as the support payments continue, it's all the same to me," she responded. "But check with your fiancé first. She might not take kindly to our arrangement. And don't forget, Jean has her expectations, especially with a new baby on the way. We need to think about what's best for Allie. Though, if it makes financial sense, we could consider other arrangements too." "You have a point, Leanne," I acknowledged. "Perhaps a more affordable daycare could work, and the savings could go towards your household needs." "That's the spirit, Mike," she replied, brightening. "Let's keep this between us, okay?" When I arrived home, Jean dashed towards me with the same enthusiasm she always had. Observing her, I found myself questioning the authenticity of her actions. Her eager embrace once delighted me, yet now I pondered if her affection was genuine. I wondered, do women still express their love in such an overt manner? It seemed outdated, a relic from another era, unlike anything I saw with my friends' partners. Jean's gaze then captured mine, her eyes probing. "What's the matter, Mike?" she inquired. Her look was sharp, not the naive admiration one might expect. I mentioned my conversation with Leanne, hinting at impending decisions needing her input given our upcoming marriage. She softened, returning to her usual demeanor, and took my hand with a smile. "Is this about us, or is it a family matter?" Jean probed. I breached a promise to Leanne by discussing our mutual concern with Jean, who seemed unsurprisingly aware of the situation, likely forewarned by her mother. I felt manipulated, as if Leanne was directing my life from afar. Jean's response seemed like an echo of Leanne's words. I masked my suspicion with agreement, then playfully circled Jean, teasing about her attire, recalling a playful vow we made for a dedicated evening together. Jean, playing along, adjusted her outfit, responding to the playful challenge. "Not yet," I interjected, "prepare yourself for a special night." She hurried upstairs with a light-hearted laugh. My ulterior motive for sending her to shower was to set up a recording device, aiming to uncover more about the influence Leanne wielded. After her shower, Jean called me upstairs, but instead, I requested her presence downstairs. She appeared in a robe, puzzled. "What's wrong, honey? Aren't you joining me upstairs?" I took her hand and led her to the kitchen, pressing her gently against the counter as I whispered, "This kitchen, every room in this house, is ours. We should cherish these moments everywhere, because once we have kids, it won't be the same." The spark in her eyes reflected her excitement. I leaned in to kiss her once more, attempting to explore further, but she resisted, her breath quickening. "Let's not wait," she urged, her desire clear. With a mutual understanding, we connected passionately, her response intense and fervent. "Wow," she sighed deeply, content and exhilarated. "That was incredible," she murmured as we caught our breath, lying on the kitchen floor. It had been an intense experience, surpassing our usual tender encounters. I realized my frustrations had fueled a more fervent approach, which surprisingly, she seemed to relish. Despite my initial intention to convey my anger, it turned into a moment of intense pleasure for both of us. Lying beside her later, her steady breathing beside me, I felt a mix of emotions. My thoughts drifted to the ongoing situation with Leanne and Jean, their actions still a secret to them. Leanne was making efforts to reconcile, and Jean, growing more visibly pregnant, seemed more vibrant and in constant need of affection and assurance. Mrs. Crenshaw had been advising me, suggesting alternatives for childcare that led me to consider developmental programs. Concerned for Allie's well-being, I researched early childhood development, reconnecting with Mildred Cross, a friend of my family, which felt like a step in the right direction. I visited her to seek her advice, as I was dealing with a situation involving Allie. Although it was late, she consented to hear me out. I explained my need for her professional assistance with Allie, aiming for a 3-week engagement. She was uncertain about the impact she could make in such a short span but agreed to give it a try. She expressed a desire to understand Allie's living conditions to assess the challenges ahead. I recounted the circumstances involving Leanne, leading to a strategic thought. She could masquerade as someone responsible for Allie's daily transport, enabling her to observe the home environment during pickup and drop-off times. Upon collecting Allie, I entered Leanne's bedroom. Leanne, seemingly groggy, reacted to my presence with a hint of irritation, accusing me of not knocking. Internally amused, I recognized her act. She was always alert. Despite her feigned sleepiness, she did nothing to hide her discomfort with my intrusion. "Leanne, I did knock," I assured her, cornering her in her own pretense. She dismissed it with a whatever and hinted at a past intimacy, suggesting a reconciliation but emphasizing honesty with her daughter. Curious, I inquired about her pain, to which she confessed her love and nostalgia for our past together. Cutting through her sentiments, I reminded her of the real end to her previous relationship, which was far from the tragic loss she portrayed. She reacted defensively, veering the conversation towards a more intimate invitation, which I promptly declined, clarifying my actual purpose for the visit. "Man, Jean really wore you out earlier, huh?" she inquired. "Don't you ever get sick of being with someone who's changed so much?" "Actually, it adds something unique," I replied. "Do you remember what it felt like when you were expecting Allie?" Her expression softened before she quickly dismissed it. Despite her efforts, my words seemed to reach her. "So, Mike, why are you here? You obviously didn't come just to chat." "The drinks are in the fridge, and I'm not up for much else," she said, her voice unexpectedly gentle and devoid of her usual sharpness. I sat down beside her, showing some empathy. I handed her $100. "Why are you giving this to me?" she queried. "I found a more affordable childcare option for Allie. It took some time to ensure it was the right place, with vibrant colors she loves and kind staff. I wanted a place that would nurture her curiosity because she's such an intelligent child," I explained, taking her hand, pretending to be deeply moved. "We created something beautiful, Leanne," I told her. "I sometimes wish things weren't so tough. I always wish that." "I wish you didn't dislike me so much," she responded, gripping my hand tightly. "It's not dislike, Leanne," I whispered. "It's more like pain. You hurt me deeply. You were my first true love as an adult. You helped me mature and taught me so much about life and love. When I found out the truth that day, it broke me. You meant everything to me, and that's why I was so upset and reacted the way I did. Yes, it was your choice, and you had the right to make it, but I couldn't help feeling a part of you belonged to me. Why couldn't you just forgive me?" she pleaded, tears streaming down her face, which I suspected were insincere. "I loved you more than anyone, Mike, but I've made mistakes. I've always been this way, and it was never meant to hurt you. You were the most important part of my life. I'd have done anything to change the past and make things right." She sat up, dabbing her eyes, then briefly exposed herself before covering up again. "Forget it, you can see me as I am. I've always cherished how you looked at me," she said, her voice cracking, then offered her hand in a gesture of reconciliation. "Hello, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Leanne. I'm 40 years old and I have 6 children," she said, extending her hand. "That's what I should have said at our first meeting. And Mike, I wouldn't change a single moment of the time we spent together. I cherished every bit of it. Yes, I'm considerably older than you. As you've come to realize, I'm older than you initially thought. And Mike, I've had more relationships than I can count, but with you, I learned a lot too. I used to say I could go on and on, endlessly. But with you, I actually wanted to. You were the first one who made me feel that way. And you were the only one who ever talked about making a lifelong commitment. Everyone else just left when they lost interest. Mike, please, just head to work. Take Allie and go. Leanne, starting tomorrow, someone from the childcare center will take Allie in the morning and bring her back in the evening," I said. Her eyes widened more quickly than I'd ever seen. "But you'll still visit her, won't you?" she inquired, her tone filled with concern. "Of course," I reassured her. As I left, I glanced back at her. "Leanne, you are much more than what you give yourself credit for, whether you realize it or not." I gently closed the door and went to Allie's room. She was standing in her crib, which was obviously too small for her. However, I was hopeful that soon she would have a new bed and everything else she needed. As I prepared to leave with Allie, I could hear Leanne crying from her room. It made me stop for a moment. I had thought Leanne was just putting on an act during our talk. Perhaps she was, but it seemed I might have touched a sensitive part of her. Driving to Mildred's, another thought crossed my mind. I was eager to check the phones. I was certain Leanne would soon call Jean to boast about the extra support I was providing. At work, I discussed some business with the team responsible for gas lines and heaters. Jean called me during lunch. "Can you come home, honey?" she asked. "I'm quite tied up today, Jean," I replied. "Mike, I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," I responded. "Mike, do you cherish me as much as you did my mother?" she inquired. "If you could, would you return to her?" "Jean, darling, you embody all that I adored in your mother, but with a fresh charm. What I treasure most in you is your loyalty. I'm free from the worry of betrayal. Jean, it's you I envision a future with, raising a family and growing old together. Perhaps your mother's choices were shaped by her struggles. We, however, have a smoother path and can build a wonderful life together, starting with getting you a car. Once the baby arrives, we should take a trip, just pick the place. But Jean, there's something I hope you can help me with." "I'd do anything for you, Mike," she responded. "It's a 2-part request," I explained. "Mike, you're the only one I want to be close to," she declared. "But if you desire something different." "No, Jean, that's not where I'm headed," I clarified, noting her readiness to adapt, reminiscent of her mother. "My request involves 2 steps. "What's the first step?" she queried. "I've saved some money, aiming for 50, and I intend to offer it to your mom." "But we just helped her," she interjected hastily. "Do we need to give more of our funds, Mike? Is this guilt for leaving her behind?" "Jean, let me finish," I requested. She nodded, her slip revealing her knowledge of the morning's financial aid, hinting at her recent talks with Leanne. I pondered over the necessity of revisiting the recordings. My plan is to provide Leanne with the funds in exchange for Allie's custody. It's beneficial for all. Allie will thrive with us, away from neglect, and Leanne can ease her legal troubles. Everyone wins. And my role? She asked. I understand it's a big ask, I acknowledged. But, Mike, I love you, she affirmed, and I'd be overjoyed to care for both of your children. I adore my little sister. However, I doubt Mom would agree to your terms for $50. I was talking about $50,000, I explained to Jean, her eyes widening in surprise. That's all the money I have saved, including what's in the bank and my investments. By living frugally in that small apartment before we moved in together, I managed to save $30,000, setting aside nearly half my salary. Plus, there's my IRA, which has company matching, and I can borrow against it, repaying through my salary. Jean, I really want my daughter to live with us. Life is good now, but it would be perfect with Allie here. Jean seemed overwhelmed by the financial details. Okay, honey, I'll discuss it with her, she responded. I might even scrape together a bit more money, I added. And I want her to know she can visit Allie anytime. Mike, are we talking about using our vacation and honeymoon funds for this? Jean asked, concern in her voice. I'll earn it back, I assured her. We need to plan this out, she suggested. Let's get to work on it. On what? I inquired, puzzled. Jean, with a playful grin, shared her idea. There's a pregnant girl staying with us, and rumor has it that a certain gentleman could win her over with a fancy steak dinner from Texas Roadhouse. That man might just have an evening to remember. Is it an open invitation, or does it have to be someone specific? I asked, intrigued. It's definitely someone specific, she giggled. She's choosy about her company, and apparently, she's got a thing for a guy who can make her evening special. She's planning a relaxing bath to prepare, but if he's too slow, she might just call it a night. I better hurry then, I exclaimed, heading for the door. Mike, Jean called out, feigning annoyance yet with a playful smirk. I'm off to TRH, I declared. You're not leaving without a proper goodbye, I hope, she hinted. I approached her, and in a dance-like move, dipped her in my arms, sealing our moment with a passionate kiss. Perhaps dinner can wait, she whispered. Jean, you know how much I love you, right? I affirmed. She nodded, lost in our embrace. Love you too, honey, she whispered back, her affection evident in our continued kiss. Let's cherish this moment. I can't, Jean. I need to look after someone who's expecting, and I promised her dinner, I said firmly. With a last quick kiss, I parted from her. Previously, I might have been swayed by Jean's pleas, but now I knew better. Her real agenda for sending me out was to communicate with her mother in private. What she didn't realize was that I, too, was eager to leave, having switched the tape in the recorder, curious about their earlier conversation. I headed to the restaurant, placed our order, and then returned to my car to wait, immediately hitting play on the recorder. In the recording, Leanne said, Jean, we're in a bind. We need to figure out how to bring Mike back into the fold. Mom, I thought you were content as long as he was financially supportive, Jean responded. Leanne countered, I believed you had genuine feelings for Ronnie, desiring your own space and a secure future for your child. Jean clarified, Mom, Ronnie can't provide what I need. He's just a stopgap solution for me. After meeting him, I just returned to my life, waiting for Mike. Mike has the potential to give me the life I want. So, he's your safety net, exactly as I taught you. Well done. But Jean, we can both benefit here. Perhaps you should suggest to Mike that you miss your family and want to return home, Leanne suggested. Why would I do something that dumb? Jean scoffed. Maybe you could mention missing your siblings and how Mike would love spending more time with Allie, Leanne pressed. Mom, I left to avoid the constant responsibility of caring for your kids. I don't care for them any more than you do. So that's a no, Jean flatly refused. Leanne hesitantly admitted, Jean, it's hard to say, but I think I genuinely care for him. And you're young, you have time to find someone new. Jean cut her off, cry me a river. If you had been more prudent, you'd still have him. And don't try to manipulate me, Mom. To have feelings, one must possess a heart. Your children are just a revenue stream to you. And I was nothing but your servant. I think you're seeing the truth now, Mom. With the upcoming welfare reform, you'll soon be without any income from that source, while Mike is doing well financially, and it's only going to improve. Plus, he's a genuinely kind person, easily misled. Feelings. It's laughable, Mom. You're just eyeing my cash cow. Absolutely not. I'm your mother, said Leanne. We're family. Mom, Mike came back and we had such an intense evening yesterday. I can't shake this excitement, and now I think I might actually care for him. I've decided he's staying, Jean responded. Well then, maybe I should let him know about your little fling with Ronnie. I could also hint that the child you're expecting might not be his, Leanne countered. If you go down that road, I'll push for a paternity test on Allie, and we'd both be in trouble, Jean shot back. Mother, you slipped up, and I picked up the pieces. We're supposed to be on the same team, which works in our favor. We can still come out on top. But if we start fighting each other, we're both going to lose. With that, Jean ended the call. I smirked, then headed back into the restaurant. Playing nice was slowly driving a wedge between them. The next day, as I was on my way to Leanne's, I caught their following conversation. Mom, we need to have a quick chat, Jean said urgently. Just listen. You've been living off welfare for 20 years. With the new governor, that's going to be capped at 2 years. So, your long run of navigating the system and living off taxpayer money could be ending soon. You need to act now, before it's too late. What are you trying to say, scatterbrain? Leanne interjected. Get to the point. I'm saying I want Allie to live with us, Jean proposed. It would mean one less child for you to worry about, and it could get Child Protective Services off your back. You're not getting any younger, Mother. Maybe it's time to let someone else take on some responsibility. Are you insane? Leanne retorted harshly. She's the one bringing in the actual money. The benefits for the others just cover the house and basic needs. I can't use that to pamper myself. I won't let her go. I've taught you how to play the game, Jean Marie. I know you're only after more control over Mike and to weaken my position. No chance. You can't have her. But Mom, Allie's my sister. I love her. What if Mike were to give you $5,000? Jean suggested. Leanne went silent for a moment. As I listened to the recording, it seemed like she was weighing her options. Then, with a laugh, Leanne asked, Okay, Jean, how much money is really in play? How much does your fiancé want, my precious, lovely daughter? Okay, there's $20,000, Jean said. He might be able to contribute a bit more, but this is my wedding fund. He's fixated on Allie. He's got these outlandish notions of trying to be a dedicated father and all that nonsense. What a fool. We can split it, 50-50. Why do you need the money? Leanne inquired. You have Mike. His earnings will increase over time. I'll give you a finder's fee of 20%. Really, Mother? How about 30% for your daughter? Jean bargained. 25%, Leanne countered. Agreed, Jean accepted. I'll discuss it with Mike tomorrow, Leanne declared. Actually, I still have his number. I'll call him now to see if I can get a bit more. But don't worry, you'll get your $5,000. Leanne hadn't contacted me. When I visited Allie before Mildred arrived that morning, Leanne resumed her playful antics but didn't bring up anything else. However, a positive moment occurred that morning. As I was leaving, Terry, the eldest of Leanne's children, called out to me. Mike, I found what you needed, he murmured, handing me a slip of paper with a number on it. I gave him $50, which made his eyes light up. Are you taking care of the baby? He inquired. Perhaps. What's it to you? I responded. It just seems like a lot of effort, he observed. But I hope you do. I'm exhausted from looking after her and just want her out of my life. But why take on all that responsibility, Mike? He walked away, money in hand. Terry, doesn't your mom help with Allie at times? I asked. She hardly knows where the nursery is, he replied. Ever since you and Jean left, I've been the one in charge. Please take her. I went to work and later called the number Terry had given me. The person on the other end agreed to assist me. It was time to conclude this ordeal. I had a few tasks left. Returning to Leanne's in the evening, I quickly went to the basement before checking on Allie. I spent some time playing with Allie, noticing Leanne peeking at us occasionally before hastily retreating. As I approached my car, I caught Hal stealthily exiting Kyle's house. He noticed me, and after a brief exchange, he pleaded with me to keep his secret from Dater, assuring it was a singular lapse in judgment. I humorously dismissed his concern, promising discretion, which led to his visible relief and subsequent rush home, where he was overcome with nausea. This encounter, though amusing, underscored a lesson about the recurrent nature of betrayal. Upon returning home, I made 3 important calls, one to my boss, who confirmed a new job opportunity in another state, another to Ronnie, a contact provided by Terry, and the last to Kyle, warning him of potential repercussions from his actions. That evening, at home, Jean sensed my lack of interest in intimacy and expressed concern over our relationship. I reassured her, questioning only her recent financial decision, which she defended as acts of love and sacrifice for our benefit. As we settled into bed, her concern shifted to the importance I placed on Allie, reminding me of our impending family and the need to prioritize our shared future. The following day arrived, and I was filled with apprehension. I was close to closing this turbulent chapter and eager to move on. It baffled me how Leanne and Jean could maintain their web of deceit and plots. It was a lifestyle I couldn't fathom, yet they seemed to navigate it effortlessly. I woke Jean up and prepared her breakfast, to her delight. She was thrilled that I decided to spend the day with her. Are we going to rest again now, dear? She inquired. No, we're planning to visit your mother and take her out for lunch, I replied. Later, we arrived at Leanne's place. I made sure to stick by Jean's side as Leanne got ready, preventing any chance for them to concoct new plans. At the restaurant, we engaged in light conversation over our meal. Leanne brought up her malfunctioning furnace, and I offered to check it for her after lunch. Post-meal, Leanne initiated a serious talk. Mike, can we resolve this? She proposed. What amount did you suggest for me to give up custody of our daughter? Pretending ignorance, I faced her. Mike, I suspect Jean misled me about the $20,000, she stated. It was actually $50,000, I corrected. Instantly, Leanne's anger pivoted towards Jean. You deceitful person, she hissed. Mike, I accept it, she continued. But I have a proposition for you. Let's reconcile, and you can have Allie without any cost. Mom, how can you say such things? Jean exclaimed. I'll pass, Leanne, I responded firmly. So, do you prefer cash or check? I'd lean towards cash, she pressed. Neither, I declared, producing a document from my pocket. Leanne scrutinized it. What is this supposed to mean? She questioned. It's a gesture of goodwill, I explained. This document is a stop payment notice. After a DNA test, it turns out Allie isn't my daughter. This list shows all the child support payments I've made. I was advised I could reclaim it legally. Yet, I believe we've caused each other enough harm. Let's consider it settled. Leanne was speechless, her expression one of total astonishment. Leanne, I'm unclear on what I did to deserve this ongoing pain from you, but it ends now. You are out of my life for good. Holding my hand, Jean and I stood united. I'm so sorry, I had no idea, I said, locking eyes with her. What about Allie, Mike? Leanne asked. That little girl adores you. It's better for both of us if I stay away. I'm too fond of her already, I confessed. I've paid for her daycare until the end of the month. You'll need to figure it out after that. If things go smoothly, I can cover another month, giving you time to organize the house. There's a CPS inquiry about you. I shouldn't have mentioned it, but I can't stand the thought of her being removed from your care. Please, treat her well, Leanne. Is that your final decision? Jean inquired. You know how much you meant to her, and our child could have had an aunt. They'll still be in each other's lives, I replied, my voice heavy with sorrow. I was referring to living together, Mike, she clarified, her eyes attempting to gauge my reaction. They might still end up under one roof, I acknowledged. Farewell, Jean. I did love you. Mike, hold on, she implored. I'm with you, not her. Forget my mother. I didn't know Allie wasn't yours. I understand you're hurt, but we need to think this through clearly. I'm not involved in her schemes. I gestured, and Ronnie approached. Jean looked at him, puzzled. Who is this? She questioned. Ronnie moved closer. I'm Ronnie, Jean, the guy you dismissed. I informed Mike about the adoption matter. You convinced me we were too young and should give up our child, planning a future together. Now, it seems you're on your own with the child. Jean, you need to return to your mother's tonight, I stated. I'll pack up and leave. The place is yours by tomorrow night. I'm taking a job in Chicago. No, Mike, she protested. I made an error, but I was loyal to you. I placed the recorder filled with her disparaging calls on the table, pressed play, and exited. The next afternoon, I was off to Texas, urgently hunting for a new home, with just 2 weeks to finalize everything. A few days after my departure, Mildred noted Allie's moodiness and sadness. She's missing her father, Mildred observed. Leanne responded indifferently, well, she's young. She'll recover. Have you been in touch with Child Protective Services? I'm facing some challenges with them. Mildred replied, I need to submit a progress report on Allie by month's end. You could use that report for them. Leanne found the suggestion helpful, remarking, Mike's unwitting assistance is still valuable to me. Mildred mentioned Mike's contentment with his new position in Chicago, adding a remark about the cold and suggesting a check on the heating. Ronnie kept me updated daily. Dater, recalling Ronnie from his days with Jean, regarded him favorably, suspecting his presence was an attempt to reconnect with Jean. Inviting him over while Hal was away, she intended to aid his reconciliation with Jean, but instead, they struck up a friendship. Securing a new apartment took me less than 2 weeks. After arranging for its cleaning and furnishing, my return to Michigan was timely. I arrived at Mildred's just after she had picked up Allie, who was thrilled to see me. Embracing her tightly, I felt a strong reluctance to let go. I settled accounts with Mildred, indicating no further need for her report. Mildred expressed relief at my involvement in Allie's life again, sharing her low opinion of Leanne. Unbeknownst to Mildred, Leanne was clueless about reaching her. My return to Texas with Allie aimed to sow enough confusion to divert attention from her. Once airborne, I contacted Ronnie, as I had daily, to inquire about any developments at my place. Ronnie reported, the two have visited your house, and all the children are in school. Should I activate the plan? I instructed, no, Ronnie, stop the operation. Erase the software. Focus on your education and future. Our involvement ends here. Ronnie, unaware of the actual functionality of the iPad I gifted him for his assistance, which he believed was for recording Leanne's conversation, also benefited from my sponsorship of his college tuition. Affected by Jean's actions, he was committed to advancing his life. I had him monitor the activity around her place, counting the exits and entries daily. I warned him about the risk of being discovered if any sound was made, emphasizing the need for stealth. He was convinced that with each press of the button, we were intercepting their private conversations. In reality, the iPad was controlling Leanne's heating system. The furnace was set to activate and heat the home, but each press from Ronnie postponed this action by a day. When Ronnie removed the controlling app, the furnace ignited immediately. Unknown to them, the gas line in Leanne's basement had been tampered with, creating a slow leak that went unnoticed due to the seldom visited location. Within minutes, as Ronnie and Dater enjoyed their tea, discussing future plans, an explosion devastated Leanne's residence, causing minor damage to the neighboring houses. The fire department arrived to extinguish the fire, but Leanne's home was beyond salvage. Leanne and Jean returned later, in the midst of clearing out the apartment they and I once shared, selling off furniture in a rush. The destruction of Leanne's house left them homeless. Without insurance, Leanne faced total loss. Their plan to move into my old apartment was thwarted by the landlord, who, skeptical of their intentions and recognizing Jean, denied them entry and contacted the authorities. The involvement of children led to a CPS intervention, uncovering an ongoing investigation against Leanne, resulting in the children's placement in foster care. They were fortunate to find a nurturing home with a couple eager to provide love and care. Amidst the chaos, Allie was overlooked and remained outside the system, cared for by the person who had always been there for her, me. Leanne and Jean found refuge in a shelter, where Leanne resorted to unsavory means for income, leading to her expulsion and subsequent descent into hardship, while Jean relied on social welfare. Their paths diverged, with Leanne struggling to survive and Jean seeking stability within the shelter. About a month after I left Michigan, Kyle came home early and found Hal. Kyle's wife had discovered, much like Dater did, about the betrayals and secrets. She sought revenge on Kyle, just as Dater did on Hal. Dater had given her my number, but by the time she decided to call, I had already moved away. In response to Kyle's infidelity, his wife decided to be unfaithful with Hal, who was readily available. Hal had a history of being unfaithful, so he frequently visited Kyle's house when Kyle was away. Kyle had been suspicious of his wife ever since I hinted at her unfaithfulness. Eventually, he caught them in the act. Overwhelmed by rage, Kyle acted violently without realizing it was Hal until too late. Kyle received a 17-year sentence for manslaughter. His wife was left with a heavy burden of guilt and emotional turmoil for her role in the tragic events that led to Hal's death and Kyle's imprisonment. Dater ended up with Hal's life insurance and a new, younger companion, Ronnie, who helped her cope with Hal's passing. Despite the age difference, they found solace in each other's company. This all unfolded a year ago. Allie, now just over 2 years old, needed a stable home, prompting me to buy a house with a yard in a family-friendly neighborhood. I shared this story with Rita, admitting the dark choices I made in reaction to my own experiences. I revealed the guilt of taking Allie, whose mother didn't care for her, and my intent to one day come clean about it. I confided in Rita, feeling a connection and a shared understanding of our past, emphasizing that despite our intention, we sometimes end up causing pain due to the circumstances we face. Mike, she hesitated, I'm not sure how to put this, but those who wronged you face their consequences. And regarding Allie, Mike, your affection for her has been evident since her infancy. The fitting repercussion for your actions is that you bear the responsibility of her upbringing until she's independent. That's my viewpoint, anyway. But given you're on your own, raising a young girl will present challenges, particularly through her teenage years. Nevertheless, you're a decent man. I believe you'll meet someone who will stand by you. And as for me, I'll keep your secret to myself. She gave me a kiss that left me breathless. I instinctively drew her closer. My hand inadvertently brushed against her, prompting a swift reprimand. Mike, she interjected sternly, I expect better from you. Remember, we need to respect boundaries. Sorry, Rita, I misread the situation. I'm willing to wait as long as it takes because you're truly special to me, I responded, noting a change in her expression. Apology accepted, she replied. Let's head out. I assisted her to her feet. Despite her stature, she moved with an ease that surprised me. We walked to her door in silence. Good night, Rita, I offered. Isn't a goodnight kiss customary? She inquired. I'd rather not, I admitted, as it's tough enough to say goodbye. Perhaps we can make plans for tomorrow. We'll see, she answered, before closing her door. I made my way home, checking on Allie as usual. Just then, a knock on the door caught my attention. It was Rita, clad in a flowing robe, hinting at a vulnerability beneath. I quickly diverted my gaze. Forgot something on your way to bed, I joked. It's that woman who hurt you, she's left you wary, she observed, holding a small box. You seemed so distant earlier. Let's reignite the fireplace, and I'll be right back, she proposed, disappearing into the kitchen, leaving me to wrestle with my conscience over my fleeting thoughts. She returned after about 5 minutes with a glass in hand. Mike, close your eyes, she instructed. I did as told, and she placed the glass in my grasp. Why do I need to close my eyes? When you limit your senses, the others become sharper, like taste and touch, she explained. So, what should I do now? I inquired. Just take a sip, silly, she chuckled. I cautiously tasted it. Wow, this is amazing, I exclaimed. Can I look now? This is the best lemonade I've ever tasted. It's not world-renowned, but I put effort into it, she laughed. Is it better than Leanne's? Far better, I confirmed. You can open your eyes now, Mike, she said, her tone playful. When I looked at her, she had an impish grin and was sitting cozily on my couch. You've enjoyed the lemonade. Let's see what fun we can have next, she suggested. My comment, did you guys had a hard time replacing your past partner? What do you think about this drama-filled relationship? Comment down what you think and I will be working on more videos tonight.